and then you can type who you really are. And in my case, it is Deirdre Pike, and my pronouns are she, her. And I actually am here today, happy to MC this event, wearing a couple of hats as a basic income advocate under all of them, whether I'm doing justice work with the Anglican Diocese of Niagara, working as a senior social planner with the Social Planning and Research Council, or writing columns for the Hamilton Spectator. This is something I really believe in, and I'm so pleased to be able to be here today to assist in this important vigil event that is happening across the country right now, led by the United Church of Canada. And I'll say more about that in a moment, but for now, it's very important that we begin our time together with a land acknowledgement. Now, where I am today, and I think many of you, although you could be joining from other places, I'm in the city of Hamilton, which is situated upon the traditional territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississaugas. This land is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement, which was between the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabeg to share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. We further acknowledge that this land is covered by the Between the Lakes Purchase in 1792 between the Crown and the Mississaugas of Credit First Nation. If you are in a different territory and know the traditional name, please say it aloud or in the silence of your heart. We are grateful to the Indigenous peoples of Turtle Island who have cared for these lands since time immemorial. We hold our hands up to their amazing resistance, resilience, and strength in the face of ongoing dispossession and colonial violence. To acknowledge these lands is to take one step in demonstrating our commitment to the process of dismantling the ongoing legacies of settler colonialism. May we bring that same commitment and spirit of truth-telling and reconciliation to our conversation today and this vigil, and so be it. Thank you. Please also use the chat room as CB has done here to acknowledge the traditional land from which you zoom in today. Okay. There's a link that I think Craig Pickthorne, who I'd like to thank right away for doing technical stuff for us today. If you have any trouble, single him out individually in the chat room for help. But he's going to put up a link that I shared, which is a video about why it's so important to do land acknowledgements. A brief video comes out of the University of Guelph. We're not going to look at it today, but it's a really great resource. So that's going to go in there. And we're going to be using the chat room to put a few links there today as we share this time together in vigil for calling for a guaranteed livable income or a basic income across Canada. And we've already had some good news on that this morning. And I know that we'll hear more about that later. But one of the most important things that we're doing today is lighting a candle in as a way of showing our vigilance to this conversation. My background is a snapshot of the vigil candle that you'll find at the United Church of Canada website, and that link will go in a bit later too. And I hope that some of you did bring a candle. I have one. You can't see it because of my funny background. There you go. But we're going to spotlight Anne McCrae, who I'd like to thank for bringing this vigil together. And Craig is going to spotlight Anne's video. And I ask you now, as we gather, to also think about two people in particular that we know who we will memorialize in a little bit. Michael Hampson and Brenda Baltzer, who were basic income participants, just an example of two who have since died since the cancellation of that pilot And we remember them today as well. So Anne has lit her candle. Let us hold a moment of silence as we do the same. If you have a candle, I'd ask you to raise it. It's very important. Part of this vigil is to ensure that we are spreading a message that we stand behind this and for this income security measure that will raise the dignity of people across Canada. So if you would hold up your candle, we will get a screenshot of this important time together. One, two, three. And I'd ask you to keep your candle burning for the length of our time together, if you can, in a safe way. And again, in our hope for basic income and remembering people who have been on the basic income and those two names I mentioned today. Now, I would like to introduce the Very Reverend, the Honorable Lois Wilson. Now, there's so many things I can say about her. One thing that I've always wanted to, or was very noticeable of in the 80s, was that she was the very first female moderator. I'm all about great leaders, church leaders that do firsts, especially females. And so I paid attention to that as I was studying religious studies at that very same time. And you know, Lois is a passionate promoter and defender of human rights and religious understanding. And you may know her for so many different reasons, including her time as a senator and chosen by John Chrétien, Prime Minister at the time, of course, and sat as an independent senator and has stood for so many right causes and has written many books. One I learned of today that I'm going to be searching for. But today she is here because she stands for a basic income, a guaranteed livable income. There are many names. We stand for this floor of income together, and Lois is going to share her passion for that now. And you'll find more about her in the chat room as well. Thank you for being here. I know you have others to be at.
Thank you, Deirdre. Don't forget, I lived in Hamilton from 69 to 78. So I know something about the community. And my daughter teaches at McMaster, and I think she's on this call. Anyway, I got a phone call from the national office of the United Church last September, asking if I would head up a new way of working for United Church members across the country. I mean, all the national churches have resolutions on the guaranteed livable income, which they pass through their courts, and then they send on to Ottawa, and nothing happens. The Anglicans have done this, the Lutherans, the Presbyterians, the Roman Catholics, but nothing has happened. So we decided to try a different approach. And the person on the phone call asked me if I would head up a new way of working, which is networking. It's, you know, the guaranteed livable income has been United Church policy ever since 1972. And again in 1986, it's gone through all the courts of our church. But I don't know if Ottawa knows that, and certainly our membership didn't know it. So we don't have to, you know, the policy is well established. So I went to work to see what we can do about this new way of working. Found out that there were lots of allies like Basic Income Canada, Lead Now Canada, the senators, who through Senator Kim Pate had motivated 50 senators to send a letter to the PM. So it's on the way. Let me point out that Canada already knows this model, the Canadian government, through the child benefit and the old age pension. I mean, I get my pension every month without fail, and I don't have to keep proving I'm over 65. It just arrives automatically. And so why should others have to go through a whole layer of bureaucracy to get the help they need? So that's a good thing that Canada, the Canadian government does know what we're talking about, because they already got 2 programs in place. The mandate I was given by the United Church is to go to United Church members to create awareness, to educate, to advocate, and get them to bear public witness where they live. And that's what we've been doing ever since, for 8 months. We now have contact people and small groups in every province across Canada, and many, many Zoom meetings have been held to educate our members. Last fall, we held a small number of vigils across the country. Today, there are 48 vigils across the country, including this one. And letters have gone to our MP. Make sure that besides your candle, you always have your pen, because you need to write a letter to your MP besides lighting a candle. The two go together. I think the churches are well placed to deal with the issue of meritocracy. You know, that the poor don't deserve this because they don't work for it, they should merit it. I recently watched a TV host program with Steve Paikin as moderator, and it was on the guaranteed livable income, and they were all saying, oh, you know, the poor you have with you always, so there's no hope, we can't do anything. And I was so mad, I finally sent him an email saying, listen, Steve, you may not know it, but that verse you were quoting is not the whole verse. It's from a library called the Bible and from a book called Deuteronomy. And it says, the poor you shall have with you always if you do not keep my commandments. So please don't just, you know, add to the kind of feeling that there's nothing we can do about it. I received a very, very good response from Steve, who said, I will never quote that again without quoting the full thing. So we need to be alert to what's being said publicly and respond to that as well. It took 20 years for Canada to get Medicare. So we're in this for the long haul. It's not going to happen immediately, but it will happen at some point. The Liberals are already flirting with progressive social policies like universal daycare and pharmacare, and they should be congratulated for that. But they should also be told that it should include the guaranteed livable income, and we hope that they initiate that soon. So that's what this is about, and I'm delighted that so many of you on this call and are taking individual action, because that's what it's about, to get you off your butt to do something yourself, to write a letter, to light a candle, to talk to your neighbor, to talk to your family, recruit people, and get them in touch with their MP. And it's not just a one-shot deal. I mean, when you write your MP, you're establishing a relationship, and they should know that you're going to be back on other things, you know, when climate change comes along, a few other things like that. And this is only the beginning. So that's my pitch, and I'm glad to be part of this Zoom. I'm going to have to leave very soon to be on another one of the 48 across the country. But thanks for inviting me. Over to you, Deirdre.
Happy birthday, Lois.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm 94 today.
Oh my goodness. And going strong.
You too will get there. Just 1 foot
I
ahead
hope
of
so.
Well, what you know, the words that you said were amazing. Your modeling is amazing. You know, some of the link in the chat room talks about the Companion of the Order of Canada, so many different things. But I'll tell you, the book that I'm going to be looking for is I Want to Be in That Number. Cool Saints I Have Known. I'm hoping I'm in there, but I don't think so. We haven't really met that much. Just kidding. What?
Okay.
But I think if I wrote that book, you would be in it. So thank you so much for being a saint around this and leading us forward. And I did put 2 of your best, very important quotes to me. Make sure beside your candle, you always have a pen, and
Yep.
get off your butt and do something. So
Right.
Thank you so much for leading that charge for us today. And again, happy birthday from all of us here. And I have met your daughter before, and she's obviously followed in some good footsteps. So thanks.
Thank you so much.
Now, next, I want to introduce Tom Cooper and just kind of pass it on over to him. He's got a whole bunch of stuff happening here. Thanks, Tom. The director of the Roundtable for Poverty Reduction in Hamilton.
That's right. And I was also a attendee of Sunday school at St. Giles United Church when Lois became moderator of the United Church of Canada. So it's absolutely thrilling to be working on this project, this movement with her, and so many other passionate leaders from the United Church of Canada, Ted, and so many others. Craig, can you just set up that Martin Luther King video for me? Because as Lois indicated, it has been an issue that faith leaders have talked about for a long time, going as far back as Sir Thomas More, back in the court of Henry VIII, who wrote about the idea of a basic income in his book Utopia, to the 1960s civil rights movement. Go ahead, Craig, you can play it.
Gain the economic security that he needs. Now, one of the answers, it seems to me, is a guaranteed annual income, a guaranteed minimum income for all people and for all families of our country. It seems to me that the civil rights movement must now begin to organize for the guaranteed annual income, begin to organize people all over our country and mobilize forces so that we can bring to the attention of our nation this need and this something which I believe will go a long, long way.
Thanks, Craig. And the leadership of the faith communities all across Canada has really been instrumental in pushing this idea of basic income forward. The idea that we wanted to test the idea of basic income really came to fruition in 2017 when Ontario launched the Ontario Basic Income Pilot Program. And Deirdre and myself, a number of other advocates in the community, had the opportunity to observe firsthand really how that pilot really transformed the lives of so many people in our community. More than 1,000 people in Hamilton took part, and you'll hear from a couple of them in just a couple of minutes. Basic income was set up to really test the idea of whether housing could be stabilized. Would people eat better? Would they stay healthier? And would people continue to work? Because that's obviously been a key question. For me, really, the idea that basic income had the opportunity to restore people's dreams about the future was absolutely phenomenal. And that's what really captured my attention around the idea of basic income. We know that poverty simply costs too much. And so we wanted to really look at this pilot project that was offered in our community in Lindsay, Ontario, and as well as in Thunder Bay, to really see how it would change people's lives. And many people know it was canceled early, but we were able to really identify some key outcomes from basic income locally. And some of those things included the ability to stabilize housing. People were moving from unsafe, unhealthy conditions into healthier apartments with their families. Our friend Tim here, who's pictured on this media article, really talked about how basic income for him enabled him to get out into the community and volunteer and really interact again with family members who he hadn't seen in 20 years. From basic income participants' mental health was much vastly improved. And this is a report that we worked on with McMaster University, showed that over 50% had much better mental health outcomes, and 30%, so 80% of people were much better off mentally as a result of receiving a basic income. And we also know that people were more motivated to go out and work. It provided a financial foundation so people could feel secure. And many of the basic income participants were already working. They were working sometimes multiple part-time jobs, trying to cobble together enough money to make ends meet. Basic income enabled them to go back to school in some cases, or plan to go back to school at least, and really look for better career opportunities. So you're going to hear from a couple of people, two of my friends who were on the Ontario Basic Income Pilot. I'm first going to ask Jodi Dean to talk a little bit about her experience in receiving a basic income. Jodi is a mother, a community advocate, somebody I look up to. She's one of the most resilient people I know, and she's joining us today to talk a little bit about her experience receiving a basic income. Jodi?
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here today to listen to our stories. I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself and my family and our personal struggles over the years. I was a single mom of 3 kids, 2 with special needs. I'd been married to my high school sweetheart for 20 years. We lived a comfortable middle-class life where we could afford for me to make the choice to stay home and raise our children. And unfortunately, after 20 years, we separated. After we separated, I found it next to impossible to work and look after my special needs daughter. Before children, I worked full-time, and I had worked and obtained a college degree. And after my daughter was born, I went back to start my second college degree in social work, which I had almost completed when COVID hit. In the time after my divorce, we went from being very comfortable living middle class to deep poverty. We survived day to day, and sometimes it was meal to meal. With no income coming in, I got stuck in a whole bunch of red tape, and I didn't qualify for even Ontario Works because I had a court order that wasn't being honored, saying that I was receiving child support, and that said that I had an income. So at the time, 13 years ago, Ontario Works could not help me at all. During this time, the only income that I did have, my only guaranteed income, was my child tax credit. This was cut off because they said that I needed to find a way to prove that my husband of 20 years was no longer living in my home. Now, being that I was a stay-at-home mom, he was the one who held the mortgage and the bills were in his name. So it was almost impossible for me to prove that he wasn't living at home. It's harder than you think to prove something like that. During the time of my divorce, we had to sell our home. It was to sell it or to lose it. And I had to sell almost every possession that wasn't sort of screwed down so that we could manage and that we could eat, that we could keep the payments going so that I could get the house sold. It was a really very, very difficult time raising 3 small children in such drastic poverty and trying to keep them stable and feeling like they've already had a ton of change in their lives, that things were not as bad as they were. But it's hard to do that when you have little ones who open up the cupboards and they can tell that the cupboards are bare. This is not something that they were used to. Since then, I have remarried and we're now part of the working poor. My youngest daughter is 13, and she has many rare conditions due to a gene mutation to her LRP5 gene. She has something called osteogenesis imperfecta, which is brittle bone disease, along with epilepsy, so you can imagine how those two go hand in hand, and spinal stenosis and many, many other diagnoses. She has many appointments every week between McMaster, Sick Kids Toronto, and she requires a treatment that make us travel to Montreal several times a year. On any given day, I can be called, when she is in school, I can be called to pick her up to either take her to deal with a break or because she's had seizures. For me to go back to work is impossible. Last years that she was in school, she missed 99 days of school, and that's pretty average for her. And I want to share my story with you, not the story that I want to share is something that I feel several years later, I still hold the shame. This was just before I was married, before I met my husband. My daughter had fallen, and I think she was about 7 or 8, and she broke her leg. And we know it's broken. This is a pretty typical thing. So we put her in the van and headed down to McMaster. And as I'm driving there, I realized I don't have any money. I have anything. Got gas to get there, but that's it. I don't know how I'm going to pay for parking. Now, as a single mom, I've got to either come up with the $20 to get into the parking, or I've got to park on the street. Well, how do I do that when I've got a little one who's got a broken leg? I can't leave her at the door and say, here, wait for me. She was like 7 or 8, park the car and come back. And I can't carry her with a broken leg from a street parking spot to the hospital. So I pulled in underneath and I prayed for the best. And while she was in getting all her tests and everything done, I texted everybody that I knew and just asked them, can you send me enough money to get the car out of parking? It was humiliating. And I should have been concentrating on my daughter. Well, instead I am concentrating on, making sure we can get out of parking. So I was ashamed and humiliated. Something as simple as parking I couldn't afford. I honestly don't know what I would have done if I hadn't had friends and family. And I'm not relaying this to explicit sympathy, but instead to share how basic security changed my life. Basic Income Project changed our lives. When we were selected for the Basic Income pilot, the first thing I did was purchase Hamilton Health Sciences parking passes. This enabled us to always have the ability to get my daughter to the hospital when needed. Each month I bought passes and I keep one on hand always for emergencies. Basic Income has given me the security that I needed to help relieve some of the stress of my everyday life. Now, during the time that we received Basic Income, my husband was injured at work and he ended up with some medical issues. While waiting to return to work, he was caught between a spot where we had no financial assistance. Basic Income stepped in and helped us keep afloat. It increased enough to help the shortfall. So that way we could pay the mortgage and buy food. And since the pilot ended at the time, my husband's injuries almost crippled us financially. But he finally got back to work and we were digging our way out. I'm constantly worried about my children, but adding the stress of money worries makes it feel like I'm almost completely broken. It drains a lot of my energy. As an example, I sit up many nights trying to figure out how I can make the budget and what I can cut. One day when my daughter's older and more independent, I'll be able to give back and I'll be able to go to work. The reality is it's not going to happen now. When the pilot abruptly ended, my husband's income was on hold. We had to stop medications for my daughter that we had to pay that weren't covered on a drug plan. Simple things that people take for granted, like being able to buy her a drink after a doctor's appointment or after physiotherapy. This was different when we were receiving a basic income. I'm thankful. I'm very thankful for the basic income. Now I'm going to fast forward a bit. With my husband back to work, we're still struggling paycheck to paycheck, surviving, not living. But I was grateful for the roof over our heads and the food in our tummies. Then COVID hit and my husband was laid off. He only just got back to work, so he was short 40 hours from being able to collect unemployment insurance. This is where CERB stepped in, and it acted as a basic income. Without CERB, we would not have been able to manage. In a short period of time, the government gave us a basic income during this very stressful time, and it was a success yet again. I hope that you are able to see the difference that basic income can make to a family like mine, because we're not alone. There are many other hardworking families that struggle to pay the bills, working full-time, and have their lives devastated in a blink of an eye. Things that are out of their control, like jobs or illness. Basic income changes lives for many people, saving them from devastating poverty, homelessness, mental and physical health issues that come along with living in poverty. Especially now with all the uncertainty, having a basic income is our next step. It works. We've seen it time and time again. Thank you for listening to my story.
Thank you so much, Jodi, and thanks for sharing that very personal story. I'd now like to ask Alana Baltzer to talk to us a little bit about her experience on Basic Income's pilot.
Hello all, thanks for joining us today. So I'm going to speak about not only my basic income experience, but my mom's basic income experience, as my mom was also a BI participant herself. And my experience, I went from someone who spent my entire life in poverty. My mom was on welfare. it was actually through the BI pilot that I discovered the reason my mom had been put on welfare was because of a workplace injury and she hadn't been able to work afterwards. And going from living in extreme poverty that sadly still exists, no matter how much it may be denied, was life changing for me. I went from spending each day struggling to have something to eat, to ensure that my apartment had what it needed, that I had what I needed. It was, I couldn't even really look for work because every single day was just focused on making sure I had food or bills were paid. And then basic income, it changed my life. And I'm going to share a bit of a quick story on how I got accepted to that because it's a bit humorous. But the day I got accepted for basic income, I got a call from the Ontario government and I had looked at my phone and I'm like, why is the government of Ontario calling me? What did I do? And it was a call telling me I'd been accepted to basic income. And I was ecstatic. Like, I'm like, oh my, I can't believe my luck. I thought if I ever got accepted, I would get the control group, not the income group. And I happened to be meeting my mom up that day, and we had gone to the application clinic together. We'd filled out the forms together, and I told her the good news. And she had seemed happy, but she also seemed pretty grumpy. And she told me later that day the reason she was grumpy with me was because she assumed that I got basic income, which meant that she didn't. But she got home that day, and there was a letter in the mailbox telling her that she had been accepted for basic income as well in the same income group. And it was humorous, and both of our lives began to change. Me being able to afford to look for work. Most people don't realize the barriers in finding employment when you don't have a secure or guaranteed income or an income that's enough to live on. How are you supposed to find work when you lack a phone, lack internet, lack a computer, and you don't have a way of accessing those? It was it was a phenomenal story. I lost track of my thought there, but made a huge difference for me in that. And it made a difference in my mom in the fact that she had several medical issues. And being on basic income meant that she was actually able to afford a diabetic diet, something she hadn't been able to afford while she was on Ontario Works. She was able to be less stressed with, which honestly made her health a lot easier to deal with. She didn't visit the doctor as frequently, which is something I noticed as well when I was on basic income. When I was on basic income, I saw the doctor maybe once every 6 months, if that, for something or the other. When basic income ended, my average visits to the doctor are about once every 2 to 3 months for anxiety, for this or for that, for stomach issues, which are constant and I really suspect are poverty related. And that came back after basic income ended. I have I'm 31, 32 years old, and I know my doctor well enough to be on a first name basis with him at this point. I don't know many other 32-year-olds without serious health issues that are on a first name basis with their doctor. And I likely wouldn't be if I didn't live in poverty. Basic income improved my mental health to such a degree that, well, I haven't seen that sort of degree till recently. I was stable. My mental health was working for me. I wasn't struggling. I wasn't depressed because I couldn't survive and that I couldn't live, that after paying bills, I was basically stuck in my apartment all month long because I had no money to do anything. Yeah, you can go for walks, you can do this, you can do that. But when you're thirsty on your walk and you forgot to buy a water bottle, you're out of luck till you get home and you can grab a cup. Best thing I will say that basic income, aside from my mental health, and I know I speak a lot about the food piece, but food for me is something I've always grown up insecure with. So when I had the money to actually purchase food with basic income, it was astounding. It turns out there's a lot of food I didn't know how to cook, and I got to find out how to cook them thanks to basic income. I was able to develop interests that I had to ignore because I simply couldn't afford those interests, such as photography. I've always been into photography, but I could never afford to have my photos printed. And I do have a couple photos printed and framed at this point. And it improved my confidence. It allowed me to be more confident in who I am it allowed me to have dignity, which when you grow up in poverty, dignity is not something you have. It's something you generally have to give up in order to survive a particularly hard day. And no one should have to surrender dignity. No one should have to struggle to have something to eat. No one should have to put their physical health conditions in jeopardy because they simply can't afford a diabetic diet or a celiac diet, or they can't afford all the medications the doctor wants you to take that isn't covered on OW or ODSP. Everyone should have a basic income to cover each person. Everyone is most people are about one paycheck away from serious financial issue. Basic income would prevent that, would allow people, if they stumble, if there's a health issue that prevents working, it would cover you, it would support you. It would show that the government actually cares about their citizens and what happens to them. As it currently stands with our current rates, the government is sending a very clear message, but we are speaking up louder. We need basic income. Basic income makes all the difference. No child should have to live without any of that, and no person should have to deal with any of that. Everyone deserves dignity. Everyone deserves a safe, affordable income to live on. And that is why we continue to fight for that basic income. And I am beyond pleased to hear the announcement earlier today about basic income. It's a step in the right direction. Here's to hoping the government actually follows through on it.
Great. Thank you so much, Alana. Thank you.
No problem.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing a bit of your mother with us and her journey, and our condolences, of course, to you. And we are just grateful for you being here. And I might just add, Alana has a job now.
Oh yeah,
security in her world, and so people are, and even some of that is related, isn't it, Alana? As you said, like some of the growth
absolutely.
that you had on BI. Yeah.
Gave
Mhm.
me the confidence to apply for a job with the city.
Yeah. So both Jodi and Alana's stories really show and highlight their personal stories, which take so much integrity and courage to share. And so we're grateful for that. And highlight, as people are saying in the chat, the very just real need and the success that comes from this kind of thinking. Now, somebody who isn't here today to tell how important the basic income was for him is Michael Hampson. And if you haven't heard of Michael Hampson, Craig is going to put a link in the chat room to something I wrote about him. A couple of other people, Dan Nolan in The Spectator, also wrote about him. Michael was another advocate for basic income and someone who was on the basic income pilot project. And his sister is here today, Sue Hampson-Strabac. And if Craig could highlight her for just a second, and if everybody could just maybe relight your candle or take a second to hold your candle again, we're going to hear a little bit about Michael from Sue.
Hello, everybody. Michael's in the corner there. A naughty little boy, as he would say. He would make a joke of that. He would be so grateful to be a part of today, and thank you everyone for the work you do. I wish I had spent more time with Michael while he was with us to learn more about it, but I can tell you that when he was on basic income, I saw the most of him until the very last year of his life. He was so thrilled and so happy. He had enrolled back in school. He had finally got an apartment where he was living stably and safely for once in the last maybe couple of decades of his life. His apartments were never safe. So basic income was everything to him, and he advocated really strongly for maintaining that, and he was devastated when it ended. His life spiraled down, his health spiraled down. His mental health, I'm sure, did spiral down, but he would never let me know that. I did spend a lot of time with him over the last few years, and he was always very positive, always saying, Sue, we're fighting this and we're going to keep going. So he always had that spirit right to the very end. But thank you, everybody. Thank you for everything you do. Thank you for keeping Michael's name alive. He would be so grateful.
Thank you very much, Sue. And when we were able to gather, we did hold a wonderful celebration of Michael's life down at St. Pat's, where
Yes.
he was often found. And that was wonderful. You know, it was a sad but wonderful time to be able to be together like we could in those days.
If I'm sorry, I didn't mention that, Deidre and Tom, thank you so much for that. That was the most amazing and the best funeral I have ever been a part of. And it honored my brother. And thank you again so much for that. It was wonderful. It was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen.
It was our pleasure, right, Tom?
Yeah, absolutely. And Michael was an incredible advocate. He came with us to Queen's Park after the government announced the cancellation of the basic income pilot and was speaking directly to members of provincial parliament about the need to keep it going. Although we weren't successful then, he had the dream that basic income would become a part of the Canadian social landscape. So that's where we are today. And we're seeing movement, and that is very encouraging in Michael's name.
Thank you. Now, someone else who stood for basic income and was part of the government that brought the basic income pilot to Ontario is with us today, and that's Ted McMeekin. He might have represented some of you either municipally or provincially. Again, Craig is going to put a link to the wonderful things that Ted has done for his community and for this province over decades of work. And today he stands for a basic income with a different hat, advocating also as part of the United Church of Canada, you know, taking a lead there in justice work as well. I just want to warn you, never write Ted and say, how can I help? Because when I did that once, I ended up running in politics. And, you know, so be careful. Be careful when you ask, how can I help? He's always got a plan. But he also always has really powerful words, and he's going to share those with us now. Thank you so much for being here, Ted.
Thanks, Deirdre. I've been asked to give a theological reflection, so I don't get to do that very often, so bear with me. The Jewish tradition has this wonderful story. When God gets up in the morning, the angels of heaven are gathered together, and God asks this simple question: where does my creation need mending today? It can be frightening to focus on all the issues broken in our world: climate change, relationships, the aching absence of a deceased loved one, hunger, mental health struggles, homelessness, systemic racism, human rights abuses. All of these issues can be immobilizing. The list goes on. And the simple truth is we have a choice to make. We can throw our hands up in despair or focus on one piece of brokenness at a time. Friends, it is certainly our place to focus on poverty as a way to mend God's world. For in God's world, there is enough for everyone to have a livable income. Remember the biblical passage about rendering unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's and unto God the things that are God's? If we were in fact to render unto God the things that are God's, there'd be very, very little left over for Caesar. Give us our daily bread would in reality become give all of us our daily bread. You know, despite the political focus on growing the middle class, there's even a federal minister of middle class, if you can imagine it. The gap between the richest of us and the rest of us continues to grow. In Hamilton, we've discovered through the Code Red series of reports huge disparities in wealth, educational opportunities, and healthcare outcomes. Depending on where you live, your life expectancy can be 20 years lower in some parts of the city than others. This would certainly not be the case if everyone had a guaranteed livable income. I also note that in the city of Hamilton today, 41% of those living in poverty are children under the age of 12. And I wonder how many will be impacted by these circumstances and never ever manage to achieve their full potential. My hunch is sadly far too many. Over the last year, we've been haunted by the COVID pandemic, with public health officials begging us to stay home and isolate in place. This is of little solace to those inadequately housed in crowded, overpriced settings. And what about the homeless? How does a homeless person isolate when they have no safe roof over their head under which to do so? And instead of spending time addressing the tragedy of homelessness through a housing first approach with appropriate wraparound services, we choose to chase our homeless out of their makeshift encampments and back onto the streets. Homelessness should not be tolerated anywhere, let alone in a community as wealthy as Hamilton. Now, mine's a Christian tradition, and I look to the scripture for guidance. And I note that Jesus gave us a new commandment. We are to love one another. He implored each of us to welcome the stranger, house the homeless, clothe the naked, feed the hungry, visit the sick, liberate the oppressed, and such. So let me ask, how we doing? More and more of the working poor struggle at 2 or 3 part-time jobs in a courageous battle to make ends meet, to put food on the table for their kids. With a wait list for assisted rental housing now in the thousands, many are often inadequately housed in far less than affordable quarters. Food bank use has skyrocketed in our city, especially amongst Ontario Works and Ontario Disability Support participants, seniors, and students. There are far too many people precariously employed or unemployed. Needless to say, all would benefit from a guaranteed livable basic income. You notice how guaranteed livable income and basic income, I merged those together. There's peace in the land, Deirdre. Today we are seeing growing support for a guaranteed livable basic income. In Prince Edward Island, for example, the Legislative Assembly, with all party consent, voted to request our federal government partner with the province on a basic income pilot. And in Alberta, of all places, 61% of Albertans favor the establishment of a basic national income. Yes, we've had some false starts. I can tell you lots about that. The most recent being the tragic cancellation of the Ontario Basic Income Pilot Initiative by a new provincial government, even after they promised during the provincial election that brought them to power that they would see the pilot through to its conclusion. Shamefully, many lives were altered, and some, as we've heard today, literally shattered. Today, we must not let historic betrayals prevent us from acting together to move forward. Friends, we have not come here today to add a deeper darkness, as Martin Luther King said, to a night already devoid of stars, but rather to light candles of hope. We can mend our Canadian world by writing to our Prime Minister, our Member of Parliament, our Finance Minister, and others, as 30,000 Canadians have done, urging them to embrace and implement a guaranteed livable basic income. And I want to suggest there's no better way to collectively, as God's messengers, get up in the morning and attend to the task of mending God's broken world. So let's act wisely and together to ensure all our citizens have life and have that life more abundantly. And let us continue to pray earnestly for those in government, in our churches, and our many faith communities to embrace this challenge and seize with optimism the possibility of the possible. God help us as we do, and God help us if we don't. Let's go. And I end with a short prayer. Let's pray together. Today we gather to learn from one another and to pray. God of all peoples, source of nurture and creation, you call us into relationship with you. Help us to get right with you by getting right with each other. Open our ears to the voices of those around us and our hearts to your persuasive spirit. May we see and understand the needs of our neighbors, and in seeing become true advocates for a fair sharing of assets. May we learn the politics of justice and adequacy, that we may act with justice, love, kindness, and walk humbly in your ways. Today we pray for all Canadians, that they may have life and have it more abundantly. John 10, verse 10. We specifically hold in our hearts low income and racialized communities who have experienced the worst of COVID and other struggles. Today we pray for our political leaders, that they may come to the realization that a guaranteed livable basic income makes sense for our nation. We're pleased to hear God, that the federal budget office endorsed a livable wage today. So we'll see where that goes. Lord, guide them as well. May they find the courage and wisdom to act with compassion and resolve in responding to the requests of tens of thousands of Canadians to implement a national basic income for all our citizens. Finally, we pray that you would grant us the grace to never sell ourselves short, the strength to carry on risking big for this good and just cause, and the wisdom to understand that our world is too dangerous for anything but truth and too small for anything but love. Lord, hear our prayer. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ted. Just beautifully put, powerfully put. And God help us if we do, that should say, and God help us if we don't. Let's go. There's that same fighting spirit as we heard right from the start with Lois Wilson. And Ted, I really appreciate that. And that it was Ted who I retweeted today. I want to remind you that this vigil is a lot about bringing attention to this issue. And as Lois said, have your pen near your candle. And so I put a link there to one of the examples of a news story that starts with a headline that says a basic income program could have poverty, could cut poverty in half in this country. That's a great headline. Then the story goes on to say the hefty price tag may be what turns the leadership of the government away from choosing this. And yet they don't always balance out the $30 billion cost of poverty through healthcare and et cetera, et cetera. And so that is why our pens are needed. That is why this vigil is needed, because we have a headline that somehow implies a good direction, but it is only a direction, a concept. We need to push it to the finish line. Ted tweeted it this morning. If you're on social media, I encourage you to, go to the United Church of Canada website. They have some social media pictures and things that will be up today. I hope ours will be there today. Ted, Tom Cooper, Deirdre Pike, Alana Baltzer. I know we're all on social media. Jodi Dean as well. So wherever you are, please take the opportunity. If that's not your channel, your pen is. We're in lockdown. It's harder for you to get to your neighbor, but you could shout across the balcony if you're in an apartment or the driveway. Encourage people to be involved. This weekend is the Liberal Convention, the national policy conversations are happening. That's why the United Church picked the timing of this vigil. It's not just a coincidence. It's purposeful to guide us in that way. So I want to thank again everyone who has really spurred us on. And now Lisa Alfano is our final speaker, who's going to tell us how we can be involved locally. Just briefly about the Hamilton Basic Income Network, which you can take all this energy that has been inspired today and join us. So Lisa, please give us some of those deets.
Thank you very much, Deirdre. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for including Basic Income Hamilton, and thanks for everyone who organized this wonderful event. Basic Income Hamilton is a totally volunteer-run group, and our mission is to engage and educate the Hamilton community about the basic income concept. And I'm here today, as Deirdre said, to offer suggestions to those who are wanting to get more involved locally in this amazing initiative that we hope could change our community and could change our country and hopefully inspire the rest of the world. So it all starts with us, right? And so I've asked Craig to put some of the links that I'm just going to discuss very briefly in the chat. And the first one is a link to the Basic Income Hamilton website, which is the Take Action section of our website. And when you go there, there are links to our social media. So as Deirdre said, never underestimate the power of social media. A retweet, a share, it really does help get the word out. And even if you have people who are more passive viewers on social media, and they might still be inspired to learn more about basic income by seeing you share this information. So all of the links to the social media are there. Also wanted to mention that Basic Income Hamilton has been running some events. They're webinars and they're free, and we've run 2 so far. And because the basic income is such a very large topic, it includes so many different sectors and is so transformational for so many different sectors. It can sometimes be overwhelming for people who are coming into the concept, and there's just so much information out there, and how do they make sense of it? So Basic Income Hamilton has decided we would start to do these webinars in order to make it easier for people to get into the idea of basic income. So for instance, we've run one on small business and basic income, another on women and work and in basic income. So those links will be on our website, and they're also part of the chat that Craig is going to share. They're very short, they're only an hour, they're very entertaining. Deirdre is actually the moderator on those, and as you can see, she's an excellent moderator. So I'm sure you're going to enjoy hearing from her and all the other speakers that we had the pleasure of hosting on those webinars. We will also be having more webinars. So if you sign up to our mailing list, which is on the Take Action part of our website, you'll find out about everything else that we have planned in the future. And we'd love to see you at a future webinar. And lastly, I also just wanted to reiterate what everyone else has been saying. It's really important for us to locally show our support, and show that support through, for instance, petitions and the support for motions like motion 46, Bill C-273. And so those links have also been provided. It only takes a minute to click on a link and sign your name. And it really does make a difference. And of course, encourage others that you know to do the same. So thank you so much for providing this wonderful webinar, and for giving the opportunity for the Basic Income Hamilton team to take part. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent job. Rounds us all out with some action. And in fact, please, I just want to note, Lisa is a teacher up at Mohawk, and also has some good advocacy stories as to why basic income has been important for students that she's met in her journey. And I wanted to mention that Sue Hamson-Strabac is also, she's a special education teacher. who's taken her lunch hour to be with us today. So these are two just amazing people that I wanted to say that come to this from other parts of the community. You can get all kinds of people engaged in this conversation because it's relevant to us all. So thank you again for being here for that. Katarina Lindman is with us today. She's from the Ontario Basic Income Network, and she's generously offered to help connect you to basic income work around the province if you're not from Hamilton. Craig and Dee did put up all those links that Lisa mentioned. And finally, other parties totally endorse basic income. The NDP are having their convention apparently this weekend as well. They are on board. And for at this point, we need to encourage the sitting government to adopt this now while they have the opportunity. And that's why we were focusing on this today. This should be non-partisan in that sense, that this is an all-party direction. That's what we want. That's why the Senate leadership in this is so important. And again, thank you to our former Senator Lois Wilson, but there's also current Senators Kim Pate and Francis Lankin lead time, and there's just so much more that we could tell you, but please follow up with any one of us if you need some help and direction, and recall the important direction that you received today from these amazing speakers. Thank you for being here, one and all. Keep that candle lit, keep your pen right beside it, and until we meet again, stay safe.
Thank you, Deirdre.